Hey everyone! Before we dive deep into this incredible journey through ancient secrets, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to Pharaoh's Code, and hit the bell so you never miss a single mystery. Leave a comment too. I want to know your thoughts on these mind-blowing discoveries. Let's get into it. Imagine for a second that the Great Sphinx of Giza wasn't the only one of its kind. For decades, we've all grown up believing that the Sphinx stood alone, guarding the pyramids like a silent sentinel. But recent whispers and controversial claims suggest that there may have been a second Sphinx, a gigantic twin that once stood side by side with the famous monument we all know today. Reda Abdel Halim, an Egyptian tourism official, shocked the press a few years ago by revealing that a statue nearly identical in size to the Great Sphinx was allegedly found near the pyramids. The dimensions were staggering, around 64 feet tall and stretching about 13.7 meters in length. Researchers from Zagazig University reportedly examined it and confirmed its authenticity at 100%. But if this is true, why haven't we heard more about it in the past 3 years? Well, that's the big question. Some suggest it's a publicity stunt to boost tourism. Others think it might be part of a larger effort to hide the truth from the public. Now, the Sphinx has always been surrounded by myths and controversies. Traditionally, it's seen as a mythological creature with a lion's body and a human head. The Egyptians were likely the first civilization to create Sphinx statues, placing them around temples and tombs to serve as divine guardians. The Great Sphinx of Giza was supposedly built during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre, between 2575 and 2465 BCE, making it over 4,500 years old. It was meant to be a portrait of the king himself, immortalized in limestone. But not everyone agrees with that story. Some researchers believe the Sphinx might have originally looked very different, and that it actually predates ancient Egypt as we know it. One fringe theory known as the water erosion hypothesis suggests that the Sphinx was reshaped over time due to massive floods or even a great deluge, yes, like the biblical flood. Supporters of this idea point to the deep vertical erosion patterns on the Sphinx and its enclosure, which they argue look more like water damage than simple wind and sand erosion. According to this view, the original Sphinx may have been a giant lion statue, far larger than the current one. Then, after a devastating flood wiped out much of the early civilization, a new Egyptian society rose from the muddy banks of the Nile. They supposedly reshaped the lion's head into a human pharaoh's face, leaving behind the hybrid figure we see today. Jumping back to the alleged second Sphinx, in 2007, Egyptologist Bassam el-Shamar presented studies suggesting that a second Sphinx once existed. He based his argument not only on physical evidence, but also on ancient texts and Egyptian religious beliefs, which emphasized duality. In Egyptian culture, everything was created in pairs: gods, concepts, even monuments. Take the avenue of sphinxes at the Temple of Luxor, for example. Every sphinx along that path was matched with another to maintain cosmic balance and symmetry. According to pyramid texts, the creator god Atum gave birth to his children Shu and Tefnut, who took on lion forms and were positioned at opposite ends of the universe to act as protectors. This symbolic duality makes it seem logical that there should be two sphinxes, not just one. Despite Abdel Halim's bold claims, famous Egyptologists like Zahi Hawass strongly deny the existence of a second sphinx, arguing that there's no solid scientific evidence to support it. So, who should we believe? Is this just an attempt to generate headlines, or is there something deeper hidden in the sands? I'll let you decide. Now let's talk about another fascinating clue pointing to a catastrophic flood in ancient Egypt. Archaeologists recently discovered a 4,000-year-old burial site containing the remains of 11 individuals, men, women, and children. This family tomb, believed to date back to the 12th dynasty, is already special because it's the only tomb of its kind found in this region near Luxor, right next to the temple of Hatshepsut. When researchers opened the wooden coffins, they found that the coffins and the linen wrappings around the mummies were badly damaged by water. It looked as if the entire tomb had been completely submerged at some point in the past, like someone forgot to turn off the tap in a giant bathtub. Could this be direct evidence of a forgotten cataclysm that devastated ancient Egypt, or was it simply caused by an unexpected Nile flood? Either way, the tomb still held incredible treasures that survived the water damage, a testament to the craftsmanship of ancient Egyptian artisans. Among these treasures were a hippopotamus-shaped amulet, a copper mirror with a lotus-shaped handle, and another mirror adorned with the goddess Sator's image. The identities of the people buried there remain a mystery. While scientists managed to identify 5 female skeletons, 2 male and 3 children, some of the other remains are still unclassified. Considering how dry and arid Egypt is today, it's mind-blowing to realize just how many ancient sites show signs of flood damage. Was there a massive flood that changed the course of Egyptian history? It's something to think about. Speaking of endings, let's jump to the story of Egypt's last gods. Over 3,000 years after the construction of the Great Pyramid, the old Egyptian deities were finally silenced forever. You might already know this story in bits and pieces, but here's the full tale. Long before the Greeks and Romans arrived, an ancient civilization from Nubia, the Kushites, rose to power in what is today Sudan. Around 2450 BCE, when Egypt was still building pyramids, the Kushites already had a complex and rich culture of their own, with hundreds of pyramids scattered across their lands. During one chaotic period between 1550 and 1070 BCE, Egypt conquered Nubia. But by the 8th century BCE, the tables turned when a Kushite king named Kashta became Pharaoh of Egypt. It was during this time that the construction of the temple complex at Philae began. Unlike most Egyptian temples built on desert sands, Philae was constructed on a lush island near Aswan, a place believed to be one of Osiris's burial sites. According to myth, Osiris, god of the underworld, was murdered by his brother Seth, chopped into pieces and scattered around the world. Isis, his sister and wife, collected his parts and magically revived him. One piece of his body was said to be buried on Philae Island, making it a sacred spot. While the Kushites began building temples there, most of the ruins that remain today date to the Ptolemaic period, around 300 BCE, after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. Fun fact, the temples no longer stand on the original island. In the 1960s, the Aswan Dam threatened to flood Philae completely. So, the Egyptian government and UNESCO launched a massive project to move the entire temple complex to a nearby island, block by block. After Alexander's conquest and Cleopatra's dramatic fall in 30 BCE, Rome took control of Egypt. Fast forward to 313 CE, Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity across the Roman Empire. Slowly but surely, Christianity spread through Egypt, pushing out the old gods. By 394 CE, the very last known hieroglyphic inscription was carved on Philae's temple walls. Some believe ancient Egypt truly died with Cleopatra. Others argue it ended when these final hieroglyphs were chiseled into stone on Philae Island. The last active Egyptian temple was Philae's Temple of Isis. The last known priest, Esmet Akum, carved that final hieroglyph, sealing the fate of his religion forever. After him, no one could read or understand hieroglyphs until the Rosetta Stone was deciphered in the 19th century. The temple itself managed to survive for another century, outlasting even the Western Roman Empire. But in 527 CE, Emperor Justinian ordered all pagan temples in the empire to be shut down. Philae's temple was converted into a Christian church, its sacred carvings defaced and erased, signaling the true and final death of ancient Egyptian religious life. And now, let's explore something truly bizarre: the psychedelic secrets of ancient Egypt. We often imagine the ancient Egyptians as conservative and deeply spiritual, but recent discoveries suggest they were far more experimental than we thought. Researchers like David Thanassi from the University of South Florida analyzed a cup found in the necropolis of Saqqara. What they discovered inside shocked them. This wasn't just any ceremonial cup. It was shaped like the head of Bees, the dwarf god of fertility and protection. Think of it like an ancient version of a novelty mug shaped like Darth Vader's helmet. Bees was known for his wild, mischievous energy and was depicted as a dwarf with long arms, a lion mask, and sometimes a bushy beard. He might have looked more like a fantasy character than a solemn deity. Inside the cup, scientists found traces of a mixture of alcohol, sesame seeds, pine nuts, grapes, licorice and honey. Not too weird so far, but it gets crazy. The concoction also included human bodily fluids, which I'll spare you the details of, and was spiked with powerful psychedelic substances. Researchers still don't know exactly how strong this mixture was or how it affected people. Was it a mild buzz, or did it send them into full-blown visions like an ayahuasca ceremony? Some scholars suggest it was part of a childbirth ritual performed in Bes's chamber at Saqqara. Picture this: a pregnant woman about to give birth is taken to a tomb-like room, drinks this shocking brew, starts hallucinating, and then gives birth under the gaze of a lion-headed dwarf god. For anyone who's ever been through labour, would you try that? I think we can all agree the answer is a hard no. Finally, let's talk about the terrifying screaming mummy. Discovered in 1881 but studied in detail in 1935, this mummy shocked researchers because it looked like it had died in absolute agony. Mouth wide open, eyes stretched in a silent scream. For years no one could figure out exactly what happened to this unfortunate soul. After decades of speculation, scientists from Cairo University recently uncovered evidence suggesting this mummy, known as the unknown woman A, may have been poisoned as part of a punishment or execution. The open mouth might not have been a sign of pain at the moment of death, but rather a natural result of the body's position and the way it was preserved. Still, it's a haunting image, a final frozen scream echoing from across millennia. It reminds us that ancient Egypt wasn't just pyramids, gold and pharaohs. It was also a place of intrigue, betrayal, hidden rituals and dark secrets. Now picture this. Picture. The scorching sun beats down over the endless dunes, and deep within a forgotten tomb in Theban necropolis, a team of archaeologists stumbles upon a sight so haunting, so chilling, it leaves even the most seasoned experts in shock. Lying there in eternal silence is a woman, her mouth wide open as if frozen in an eternal scream. Her skin, shockingly well preserved, almost looks like she might suddenly gasp back to life. But who was she? And what could have caused this terrifying expression to be sealed on her face for thousands of years? This woman met her end during the New Kingdom period, a time when the art of embalming in ancient Egypt had truly reached its golden age. Her body wasn't just wrapped and stashed away. It was carefully preserved using the finest, most luxurious ingredients imaginable. Think frankincense, that rich, aromatic resin that was worth its weight in gold, and juniper oil, which was as prized then as rare perfume is today. These weren't your everyday burial supplies. Only the elite, the well-connected, or the supremely loved got this kind of treatment. The mysterious woman's final resting place was none other than the family tomb of a famous architect named Senenmut. If that name sounds familiar to you Egypt fans, it should. Senenmut wasn't just any architect. He was the brilliant mind who designed some of the most iconic structures under the reign of the legendary female pharaoh Hatshepsut, around 1440 BCE. Senenmut's achievements earned him immense power and prestige, and his family tomb would have been an honoured, almost sacred space. But who exactly was this woman? No one knows for certain. Her name has been lost to the sands of time, but many believe she was related to Senenmut, maybe a close family member. That's the best guess we've got, pieced together from fragments of clues and the grandeur of her burial. Now, let's get to the part that truly fascinates. Her face. That horrific, wide-open mouth that makes her look like she died in unimaginable terror. Why was she screaming? Professor Saha Salim, using cutting-edge scanning technologies, examined her remains in incredible detail. She found that this woman was around 48 years old when she died. Not a particularly old age by ancient Egyptian standards, but certainly mature enough to have seen plenty in her lifetime. So, what really happened to her? According to Dr. Salim, her twisted, open-mouthed expression is likely the result of what's called a cadaveric spasm. In simple terms, this is a sudden stiffening of the muscles that can occur right after death. It's like the body's final sudden jolt, a final flex of the muscles that can freeze someone's face into a grimace or even a scream. When that happens, it can leave the deceased looking as if they died in horror, but in reality it's a purely physical reaction. No drawn-out torture, no horrifying final moments, just a spasm. So, while it might be a little disappointing to those who love a dramatic, gruesome tale, there's actually something comforting in knowing her terror-stricken face wasn't the result of agony. She might have passed peacefully, her soul already starting its journey to the Egyptian afterlife, what they called the Field of Reeds, before her earthly body betrayed her with that frightening final expression. Enter Pharaoh Senekenre Tao, also known as Senekeneret Tao II. While his name doesn't roll off the tongue quite like Tutankhamun or Ramses, his death might be one of the most violent in pharaonic history. Senekeneret Tao ruled the southern part of Egypt from about 1558 to 1553 BCE, a turbulent time when northern Egypt was under the control of the Hyksos, a group of foreign rulers who had swept in from the Levant. The land was divided, tensions high, and humiliation for the true Egyptian kings ran deep. The Hyksos demanded heavy tribute from the southern king, essentially extorting him and his people. Legend has it that the spark that ignited the war was an angry complaint about hippopotamuses. Sounds ridiculous, right? But history can be stranger than fiction. The Hyksos king Apophis complained that the sacred pool of Thebes was too noisy because of the hippos, and he demanded that Senekenret destroy it. To the Egyptians, this was a sacred space, and the demand was more than just an insult. It was a direct attack on their way of life and their gods. Senekenret couldn't take it anymore. Fueled by rage and national pride, he decided to resist, but his rebellion came at a heavy price. Senekenret and his son Kamose both died fighting against the Hyksos. Although they paid the ultimate price, their sacrifice eventually paved the way for victory. After Kamose's death, Queen Ahotep, Senekenret's wife, took the reins. Through her leadership, the Egyptians ultimately expelled the Hyksos and reclaimed their beloved northern lands. Fast forward to 1886, when archaeologists finally unearthed Senekenret's tomb. What they found was shocking. His skull bore an enormous gaping hole, a clear sign of violent death. When they unwrapped his mummy, it smelled so awful that the archaeologists guessed he might have been hastily embalmed right on the battlefield. Imagine that. A pharaoh's body prepared under such dire conditions, far from the careful, ceremonious processes that Egyptian royalty usually received. Thanks to modern X-ray technology, scientists got a closer look at the pharaoh's final moments. His injuries tell a brutal story. A massive gash on his forehead from a battle axe or sword, another savage blow above his right eye, deep cuts on his nose, and even injuries suggesting he was struck by a heavy, blunt object. Experts believe he was struck at least a dozen times, with each wound more vicious than the last. The final, fatal blow. It appears to have been a spear thrust at the base of his skull, ending his life in a particularly gruesome fashion. In other words, Senekenret didn't just fall in battle. He was overwhelmed, struck down repeatedly, and very likely executed on the battlefield or immediately after capture. A king's death, yes, but one soaked in blood and violence rather than the serene passing into the afterlife the Egyptians so cherished. Both of these ancient figures, the screaming woman and the brutally murdered pharaoh, show us just how complex and deeply human these stories from ancient Egypt really are. They're not just distant legends. They're tales of real people with real fears, loves and battles echoing across millennia. If you enjoyed diving into these haunting mysteries with me today, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to Pharaoh's Code, and leave a comment letting me know which ancient secrets you'd like to see uncovered next. Your support means the world, and it helps us keep exploring the wonders and chilling secrets of the ancient world.